And according to YouTube, we are live. Welcome to Corner Comics, episode 8. This is your weekly comic book reading club. We get together, we share a few issues with each other, run down those issues, talk about those issues. Russ, how you doing this week?
Booyah! Doing great. Thanks for asking.
So this week, Manuel's not with us, so we've only got 4 issues, but I seem to have overloaded each of us with a couple older issues that are severely heavy on text. I also didn't send out the reading list ahead of time. I sent it out this morning. If you follow me on Twitter at Berkoff, Berkough, you can get the comics that we're going to talk about ahead of time, and then that way you can follow along with the conversation. So let's run down the picks of the week. 2 picks that I made were older comics, which I had alluded to last week. Weird Science issue number 12. I think this is the one that was published in 1952, but I'm not entirely sure. There's some confusion as to which number 12 it is. I was reading up on that. It's either 1950 or 1952 by EC Comics. And then my second comic of the week is Weird Fantasy number 6. This is also an EC comic. It was published in 1951, I believe. So, Russ, which 2 do you have?
Okay, well, I bought Punisher Kill Crew number 4. Not the latest one, but I think there are only 5 issues in this run. It's the Punisher is going off on. Well, we'll get into it later. The other one I chose is The Wild Storm number 6. Came out in 2017. I guess sort of DC adjacent as a DC owns Wildstorm now. So there's no DC characters that you know. It's all Wildstorm there.
I have a feeling that your 2 picks were kind of in response to my picks.
Actually, not quite. I had the stuff that I was trying to be sort of in line with what you were doing, but the stuff that I read and wanted to put there just didn't seem to fit. And these other issues just sort of rose in my consciousness as like I really want to share these. So
Okay.
I decided to.
I feel like Kill Crew, after I read my 2 issues, and then went into Kill Crew, it was like, oh, okay, this is nice, lighthearted. I don't have to think about it. There's no... It just flows really nicely.
It does. It's like it's the animated series. It needs to happen.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, let's start. We'll start with my picks. We'll get through. Maybe we'll do one of mine and then one of yours, and then one of mine and one of yours.
Sounds good.
We'll start with, and I've got a nice little transition this week. So when you check out the archive version, you'll see the comic issue. The cover will fade in.
Nice. Excellent. Good work.
So, Weird Science number 12. This is done by EC Comics. Do you know much about EC Comics?
Not about their history. I mean, I'm certain I've read a bunch of books like this, but not specifically EC Comics. The only thing when I think EC Comics, I think of some stupid superhero that was made of energy that could change shape. I can't remember his name. I don't even know if that was EC Comics, though. Like E-Man. You remember he had E equals MC squared across his chest?
I think so. I don't know if that's EC or not. So EC Comics was William Gaines or Bill Gaines. He was the son of the guy that started EC Comics. So it was Education Comics or Educating Comics originally, and then it became Entertaining Comics. EC is the reason that the Comics Code Authority came into existence. So Bill Gaines is the guy that testified in Congress when they were asking him about the horror comics of the 1950s and how they were warping children's minds. And so I think there's one issue in particular. The cover is a guy holding a woman's severed head and an axe. And like part of the famous, testimony in front of Congress is they're talking to him about this cover, and he's like, well, we could have done more. We could have had blood leaking from the neck and like all this stuff. So needless to say, the company didn't last very much longer outside of Mad Magazine. So Mad Magazine came from EC.
Oh,
Um,
some good history there.
yeah, but Weird Science, Incredible Science Fiction, Tales from the Crypt. Tales from the Crypt is also EC. All these titles eventually faded away. Um, I don't know how I came upon these comics. Um, I'm trying to think what I was looking at, but I stumbled upon them and I started reading these, not realizing all of that history.
Hmm.
And I was really surprised by the quality of the art and the stories for how old they are. Because my experience with most older comics, specifically like older Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, the art was not always the best, and it felt sort of primitive.
Hmm.
These comics, on the other hand, were highly realized. I feel like. Weird Science, it is an anthology series. Most of the books that EC put out were anthology series. Um, each issue has 3 to 4 stories in it, usually 6 or 7 pages each. This particular issue has 4 stories in it. The first one is Lost in the Microcosm, which is about a guy that gets shrunk. The second story is Dream of Doom, which is about a guy that cannot stop dreaming and um, what that journey is like for him. The third story is Experiment in Death, which is sort of I guess for the 1950s, a modern take on Frankenstein. And it has a nice little twist at the end. And then the last story is Things from Outer Space. I don't know if you read all 4 in this issue. Things from Outer Space is kind of a throwaway story, so we don't really have to talk about that unless it struck your fancy.
Nope, didn't strike me. I mean, it it just seems like something I've heard before, but since this is so old, this could have been the first one for all I know.
Okay.
Uh, okay, so my take on this book is I just went in and just blindly said, let me just read it and see if I like it and what I like about it. So, for it to have been made in the 50s, this is actually pretty crisp art.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Pretty clear. Uh, 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 the size and the shape of humans are make sense. There's style to it. Someone made an effort to, I always have an issue with whatever somebody is really trying hard in a comic. You just make them grit their teeth, and then that means they're really trying, and that's all you really got to do. So I was looking for things like that, but there was a good conveyance of emotion sort of across the board. So, especially for something made in that 50s, I have to say that I kind of enjoyed it even now. So that's saying a lot to the quality of what was there. In addition to that, a lot of freaking reading, but uh, uh, everything is well explained,
Yeah.
right? You don't really like how this happened, where is this coming from, why is this happening? You don't get that here. In the telling of the story, it is all made clear. You don't really have to try to, you just have to just take the ride. Say, we're going to take you on a ride. We're going to let you know what's happening all the way. And we hope you enjoy it. And let's get started.
Right.
So for me, they were mostly like well written Twilight Zones.
Yeah.
Uh, my one issue, if I have to make one, is like, say they got 6 pages, they got to tell this story, right? And pages 1 through 5 are so amazing. And I'm like, oh, you got to finish up. You got one more page left. I'm like, oh, okay, well, homeboy dies. And then
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
that's it, right? And so I felt like you really were pulling me in and doing it. And then the last episode, oh, well, I just married my daughter and we're done. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I felt like uh, um, that happened at the end. But it made me mindful of things like heavy metal, like
Oh yeah.
why isn't there a heavy metal animated series in this? Since considering what is being shown in our times, people would watch it. You know what I mean? Uh,
Yeah.
I also went and reached out and found there is a Creep Show TV series that started this year.
Okay.
I didn't know if you were watching it. I just found out about it. So I believe it's a web series on some off-brand, some group named Shutter created it. Who knows who they are? But there is going to be a season 2 from what I can see. So there's something there. If you like this kind of thing, if Twilight Zone, if you don't want to subscribe to CBS All Access to get the latest Twilight Zones, there's other things out there that may tickle your fancy. So all in all, a good, strong book. Definitely, because you can imagine there's so much story in here, and just this book. Imagine if you had a full-on graphic novel of this. This is something that could take you a week to read.
Yeah, they do. So Dark Horse, I think, has the licensing right now, and they have versions of this that you can buy, which are the EC archives,
Okay.
and they're like remastered from the original prints. So they've gone in and they've redone all of the colors digitally and reproduced it, and they're nice hardcover collections that you could buy.
Hmm.
So, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's probably 6 to 8 issues of these in each one of those hardcovers,
Hmm.
each one of those hardcover volumes. Um, and if I'm not mistaken, they're fairly reasonable. I think they're like $20. So,
I could see me buying one and sort of having a coffee table type of thing, especially if it's a hardcover.
right, yeah,
Uh, that because this is some, if you're into it, if this is your thing, it's some good reading, and you don't have to be smart to get it. Everything is really pretty much explained to you, and you're taken along that ride. So it's a quality book.
all right. Do you want to talk about the individual stories at all? The Lost in the
Uh,
Microcosm or Dream of Doom?
we can, if you like. Of these, I sort of like the best, probably the microcosm,
Okay.
because I felt like of all of them, it was more a complete story and a reasonable ending for what happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? There was a I have no fault at all for this story. I can complain about some of the other ones,
Okay.
but I felt this one took me all the way through. Gave me something to think about. Didn't necessarily give me an ending, but gave me a great stopping point. It didn't ruin the momentum. It didn't, you know what I mean? And I'm not upset that I didn't get a full-on resolution like some other ones were. Like, who's your resolution? He married his daughter. You know what I mean? That
Right.
didn't happen here.
Right.
Uh, so, so of them all, this Mike, this one, this remember that? I don't know if you remember, old enough to remember a movie called The Incredible Shrinking Woman
Vaguely.
with
Yes.
Lily Tomlin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And during the whole episode, she's getting smaller and smaller, and they're doing all sorts of perspective long before we ever did The Hobbit. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it was, and then in the end, she ultimately gets, I guess, microscopic or whatever, right near the end or whatever. So it's certainly not this, but it sort of gave me that vibe, and it also made me think of Ant-Man and the Microverse.
Yeah.
And, and in addition to that, I've even seen stories in that universe where they talk about, I think it's one, so a Watcher kind of story, where somehow if you keep shrinking, you shrink into the actual macroverse again, like there's a cycle of it.
It's like
Like you don't really
cyclical.
stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it made me think of that, and the fact that this predates all of that, I
Right.
thought was kind of amazing.
All right. Cool. So, which one of your issues do you want to do first?
Well, we got to go with the Punisher Kill Crew, man.
All right.
So let me pull it up here. So the Punisher Kill Crew, sweet and simple. Uh, Evil people from Asgard or whatever, frost trolls, all this came to Earth, and they started murdering people and trying to enslave them. And there's a whole bunch of orphans whose parents got killed that Punisher promised these kids. He made them draw on a piece of paper the monsters that. So he has all these drawings he carries with him of all the monsters that killed their parents. and he promised to them that he would, avenge them. And
Right.
so he goes and steals Thor's goat, flying goat, and he straps it to the front of his Punisher van, and they fly into time and space into the land of Asgard, and he's going out there murdering giants and or trolls, and it's amazing. He is full in. He does not even get this is funny. He is just doing his thing. He and the level of murderiness is great. It's delicious. And along the way, he runs into a cast of characters, and including Foggy Nelson, who is
Yes.
uh, Daredevil's psychic friend with no powers whatsoever, and probably can't even fight. But he's the human involved in there. Along the way, he gets Juggernaut, and all of them saying, "Hell no, I'm not going with you." And he shows them the pictures from the orphans, and they start crying. And they're like, "Yes, this is so righteous. We have to avenge these children, right?" And he finds the Black Knight in this one, and they go and it's funny. And they eat weird food, and there's one guy who calls him like the Skull because he doesn't really know the name, but
Right.
he
Skull
smears
Man.
it Skull Man, right? And these are giants. These are not like little beady beings. So it flows. This whole story, it just flows. There's no slowdown. Everything is there right for you. Every panel makes sense. It's just the right level of humor. It's just the right level of murder. It's just and gore,
Yeah.
and just doesn't like if this was an animated series, I would not have been able to take my eyes off of it. See, there. What do you got to say about it?
So Jerry Dugan, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, is also writing Marauders, which
Mhm.
is probably in my top two of the Dawn of X books that are out right now.
Yeah.
Uh, he's got a really lighthearted style to the way that he writes. So I do like that, and it's sort of suited to this kooky, weird amalgam universe that they've created with Punisher and Thor and the post War of the Realms stuff. It's interesting to see Black Knight in here, especially since I brought in that old X Men Avengers crossover last week,
Hmm.
and I hadn't seen him since. So that was cool. The background to this episode is actually the panel of Nowhere. I thought that was really cool. That I love that concept, just the dead celestial head
Hmm.
floating in space, and these little miniature beings are taking up residence. Um, Foggy Nelson, I think I wrote in the notes. He's like the nerd that shows up to the house party with all the cool kids and jocks, and then has a
Yeah.
crazy story to tell on Monday.
Hmm.
um,
Uh,
really surprised to see him in there. I was like, what the hell? What the hell is he doing to this? But yeah, I mean, it's good. It's a fun ride. It's nothing too out. I mean, it's outrageous, but it's not. It's not anything that you really have to like force yourself to get through. You know.
mm. I like where Punisher broke his sword trying to kill this demon. Demon laughs, ha ha ha! You can't, your weak ass sword. And then Black Knight comes in and straight up beheads him, and all the homies go, "Yeah, buddy!" And he dies.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yes, that's how you do this, right? This needs to be. Why isn't this an animated series? Why are they not just doing stuff that flows so well like this?"
Yeah. I don't know. Um, Shout out to The Shining. There's that one panel where Frank Castle is Jack Nicholson's character.
Oh yeah, yeah, I like that too. You're right.
um, yeah, this is just it's a crazy. They could even
Crazy
do
fun.
they could do just like they have the Marvel shorts. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
seen that on the Disney Plus
They
service.
could just make this a hour and a half animated movie, and it would be amazing. Why they're not doing that, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
But maybe they're listening to us out there. Maybe they'll consider it.
Hopefully somebody is listening.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just lighthearted and enjoyable. I really liked it. the oil painting style seems to be gaining in popularity. I've noticed that in a few Marvel books,
Mhm.
um, and that's nice to see. It's, it's sort of we're sort of moving away from, and I saw this with Far Sector when you brought that in. We're sort of moving away from the traditional heavy black outlines and things like that because you don't need those elements in the art in order to reproduce it,
Oh,
right? So
got
the heavy black lines and the outlining and all that kind of stuff was sort of an artifact of the way that comics were printed back in the day.
hmm
You had to have that in order to reproduce the art, and now we're living in a digital era where you can do whatever the hell you want. So
and I do like the coloring here. I have to say, you know, I it's not super bright, but it's also not super dull. It's really, it's just really it's just right. It just fits. It's just I hate when I don't have the technical wording for it, but I just really enjoy how this whole thing comes together.
yeah, it's kind of vibrant. It's yeah, it's got a painterly quality to it,
Yeah.
um, which I really enjoyed. I like that.
Okay.
All right. So moving on, we'll do my second pick, which is Weird Fantasy number 6. This is 1951. Again, another EC book. Um, this one has 4 stories in it. The first one is Space Warp, about a guy that is testing a faster than light space drive in a new ship. The second story is The Dimension Translator, which is a story about a guy that can make 2-dimensional objects 3D and 3-dimensional objects 2D. And that's kind of kooky and zany. The third story is And Then There Were Two, which is a story about robots that are discovered by humans, and what happens when they rejoin human society. The third story is Rescued. Oh no, the fourth story. I'm sorry. The fourth story in this book is Rescued, which is about a crew that goes to rescue a stranded crew on another planet and what happens there. Sort of very Twilight Zone, that last story. Um, what were your thoughts? I know Space Warp, you kind of took a shot at that one earlier about, about the guy that goes on this trip and comes back.
I didn't get to the last story,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I'm sorry. I ran out of steam. I'm sorry I let you down.
That's all right. These are super text heavy, so
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, while this was a good book, I didn't feel it was quite to the level of the previous one we read.
okay.
Uh, uh, I felt again that this is another one of those, even more so than the previous book, more rushed endings,
Okay. That's
right?
fair.
Uh, this is not to say that I didn't enjoy it because I am a sci-fi dude at heart, so it all makes sense. But this is the one, remember, where he went through time and everything got all the way back, and then this woman who looks just like his wife, it's his daughter, and I married her in the last panel,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, dude, can you? You didn't even really end it. You're like you just tell me what happened after. You know what I mean? So, but getting there was fun and interesting, even though not quite. It wasn't quite as deep as what we read in the previous book.
No, I did like the concept though,
Yeah.
of just the faster than light drive, and I wouldn't have thought that people were really thinking about that back then before we actually touched down on the moon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like it's just that there wasn't enough interest. I think it was always there because E equals MC square. All those things are those are decades old. All that stuff.
Yeah.
Mathematicians and scientists, they may not have had the ability to do anything with that information, but I don't think it's new information.
Right.
I think so. I think uh, I think all of that could easily have been thought of then. It also makes me think of the guy, say, who created calculus, Euclid, was
Yeah.
back in what, Roman times or whatever, but he's still using that map to describe the world. So I don't. I don't really feel like we've advanced as humans that far. I guess we could do calculus in high school, some of us.
Right.
But I think a lot of this is old stuff. I did like the idea of the dimension translator. That just shows to show you that no matter how smart you are, you can still be an idiot. You know what I mean? I have the ability to create these great wonders, but I still let my emotions and wants rule me, right? And maybe that speaks to humanity in a certain way.
It is sort of a testament to selfish desires, right? Because
Hmm.
he creates a woman, and then she actually has a mind of her own, and he's chasing her around.
Hmm.
And he's like, "No, I created you. You need to, come back." And it's when he's chasing her that he gets caught up in his own machine, and then gets snapped into a picture or a photograph,
Hmm.
and becomes two dimensional. And the
Yeah, I don't know if the moral is be careful what you wish for, or stop going chasing after foolishness, or whatever it is. But it's a decent story with a very Twilight Zone ending.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, but it just the other book, the previous book, spoiled me. Like if this was the only book on that you brought, then I would have judged everything by this.
okay,
But the other book, for me, when I first saw it, it was like fantasy. I thought maybe this would be more sword and sorcery. So I
right,
was kind of surprised going into it that it was more science fiction for it to be called fantasy.
sure,
Uh, but so I want to say if I compare the art, I even feel like this art is a quarter step below the previous book. Also, obviously different artists or whatever,
yeah.
but
The thing that sucks about this particular time in comic books is people weren't getting credits for their work. The writers and artists and things. Um, EC was on the forefront of that. They used to let their artists actually sign the artwork that they did. So
mhm.
you'll see hints of it. If you go through enough of their stories, you'll start to see like, oh, okay, this was Feldstein. This is his style. One of the other artists was Wally Wood. Is highly regarded. I don't know if these are his stories or not, but I know he was. I think he was in his 20s or late teens when he started working for EC. So his art developed along with these books over the decade.
Mm. So this is more. I want to say there's more irony in this book and these stories than maybe the previous one. Maybe that's the way I would. You know what I mean? Oh, it's really ironic ending considering how he started, right?
Right.
As opposed to sort of straight through books. Uh, but that's sort of my take. And I did glance through the last story, and again, more irony.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Um,
But when you say fantasy, dude, give me some swords and sorcery, man. I'm talking about fantasy. Just, this should have been more back to the weird science because it kind of wants to be weird science, but I guess maybe the types of endings, the types of stories they're telling, it's still a science window dressing, but they're trying to go somewhere else with it.
right.
Yeah. Like, this guy goes into space with a girlfriend that's too young for him, and then he comes back and marries her daughter, who's probably also too young for him. So yeah, there's some irony there. But and again, even with this one where all the time travel, there really wasn't much to it. There was time change. You came back, everyone's older. There's no monsters or anything. It's just things are
Right.
different. And here's your daughter, and go marry her. You know what I mean? It doesn't. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was gonna say. I think I don't. I don't remember the first time that I encountered that concept. That that space and time are linked, and that
Yeah.
if you're traveling faster than light, time is different in different places. I don't
Hmm.
remember the first time that I encountered that concept, but if I was a child of the 50s, I feel like this would have been groundbreaking for me, and it probably would have been the source where I encountered the concept of, oh, okay, if I'm on a ship and it goes so far off into space, but it's traveling faster than the Earth is, you know.
So, but then I look back to Isaac Asimov Foundation,
Right.
and there's a BBC radio story, apparently, BBC radio trilogy back in 1951.
Okay. Yeah, so this would have been around the same time, the same year
But
or the
now,
year after.
now I'm interested. So, because I've been doing some when I was a lot younger in Los Angeles. There was this KNX News radio station. I'm sure it was AM. But at like 8 o'clock, they would have these scary stories, like you hear the door creaking close, and they're
Right.
like, "Come in," and I really was into that, right? And so when I look and I'm thinking, well, where are those stories now? And then I'm thinking, because I was trying to match you, I was trying to find some things like Bring the Shadow or things like that to sort of go into the same era, what you were doing, and I found a lot of those old Shadow audio stories that I could listen to,
Okay.
right? And I really like those. And I'm thinking, where are those now? I went, and I looked, and Audible has it where you can sort of buy, but why aren't they making more of that? You know what I mean? Because people are doing podcasts.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of that, there's a Wolverine podcast, right?
Yes.
Well, that did you know that season 2 is already out there now as well?
I was actually, yeah, I was taking a look at that it's on Marvel's website, right? They have a,
I, I think so, but your whatever podcast software that you use can find it.
I don't think that you can get it on Spotify, which is where I listen to most of my podcasts.
Well, I'm using what app am I using? What podcast app? Because I'm getting it just fine. Uh, it is Pocket Casts.
Pocket, okay.
I'm using Pocket Cast. I believe it's free now, and I find everything that I want, and including that Wolverine. So I've already downloaded some of it to my phone, so I can listen to later. And speaking of that, the Green Lantern that we talked about last week, I went and finally downloaded the audiobook from the library for her first big novel. They got all these awards. N.K. Jemisin.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay.
And it's actually pretty good.
All right.
And but I'm thinking you still haven't even read who is that? What is that writer you introduced me to?
Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, right. Because
Yeah.
he is those some hella novels. It's, you know what I mean? It's like Stephen King size novels, right? But I've read that whole trilogy,
Jesus,
even though you
dude.
introduced her for the first book, and I know you're not there yet.
No,
This
yeah.
one isn't. This one is not as long. Just so you know.
Okay,
The name of
so
the book is
not
called The
as
Fifth
not as
Season.
long as in half the size of a Sanderson novel or a quarter
Yes, I
of
would
the
say
size.
about half. So the first, this book, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, the total is about 14 hours.
Okay.
So that's not murderous.
No.
You can make that work.
Yeah.
And it is deep. And at first, when they started introducing, like, this might be too deep for me, and then she let that go and just told the people story, and I've been enjoying that.
Okay.
All right. So shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah, we'll go to the next one. And then your last
so
pick.
yeah, I picked the Wildstorm. So I was always a fan of Wildstorm comics.
Yeah. Yeah.
From way back when. So was it Wildcats part of Wildstorm when they had an animated series?
Yes. So
Right.
when Image was formed, it was Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Will Portacio, and a few other people, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Lee's imprint was Wildstorm. So that was his sort of universe, and Wildcats was the first book in the Wildstorm universe.
So DC bought Wildstorm. They also bought Jim Lee. Probably was a good deal.
I heard that was his plan all along. Yeah.
So since then, they've brought Wildstorm characters into the greater DC universe. This story, the Wildstorm, though, is not. This story, the Wildstorm, is the reimagining of that universe outside of DC continuity. It's its own thing.
Right.
So if you ever loved any of that, all those characters show up here. It is sci-fi. I feel like it's very well explained. I feel like the art is very good and inviting. I actually read the first season on DC Universe Online. I read the first, 12 issues of this.
Right.
And it's a very good sci-fi book with good art, good concept. And so I just chose this as one of them because it explained it. Since you made me listen to all that explaining on yours, I'm thinking, well, here's some of mine.
All right.
And so this is number 6 in the first season of 12 episodes. And it really sets up in this universe. Basically, the Earth has been, the whole science realm is developed, separated into two companies or groups. One of them is in charge of everything on Earth, and one of them is in charge of everything in space. Right? The
Right.
problem is everything is scarce in space, so that both of them felt like they got the good deal, but they're also cheating and operating in each other's realms, and so there's spying and all that, and powers, and of course, apparently there being some other planets that have been all along, and all of that is really normally that would be very gobbledygook and involved, but I feel like this sort of flows well in comparison to how, because this is very deep stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's hard to catch up on. I think the art is quality, so that you're not sort of taken out of it. And the action set pieces are very nicely done, very detailed. People punching through walls, the actual the fights, the battles, even of people who don't have powers and pressure points and ripping out arteries and all that. It's all there, right?
It's very gruesome. The
It, it,
first
it
like 6 pages.
yes, but the detail is there,
Yeah.
right? And then there's a. By the way, there's deeper than this. There's more science fiction than what you see on the surface, and they leave you with a little bit, and then the little dude who is actually probably thousands of years old, uh, just sort of explaining how the universe works, and that's why I picked it because it sort of explained sort of how this universe works politically, and
Yeah.
so anyway, I thought it gave me action, sci-fi, and potential for more. Look good, well paced. That's why I chose it. What do you think?
So I feel like I did enjoy it and I liked it. I do feel like you have to have a little bit of knowledge about the Wildcats in order to get this story, though. At least jumping in at issue 6.
Yes,
So
agreed.
that helped, and I'm glad that I had that in the back of my mind because after I get through the first 6 pages, I'm like, okay, what the hell happened? Like, this dude just got straight up murdered in a very fantastic way. Actually, two dudes.
Mhm.
Um, all right, where are we at here? Right. So, so then after the first 6 pages or whatever, it's like, okay, the Wildstorm, chapter 6. All right, this is where the story kind of really begins. That was the
Yeah,
prologue.
yeah,
Um, and seeing like the two women warp in, I was like, okay, that's if this is Wildstorm Wildcats, that's got to be Void, right?
yes,
So I was able to follow that, and then to see the shorter man walk in, like, okay, that's Jacob Marlowe. You know, it was hard for me to read through his dialogue without hearing the dude that did the voice
the
acting
voice.
on the
Yeah,
animated series.
yeah. I say lean into that. Don't just let that go. That works perfectly.
It
Yes.
does. It does. Yeah, I mean, it's Warren Ellis. The artwork on the whole, I'm not a huge fan of, but it's not bad. I mean, it's detailed. You're able to follow along very easily. I think my only other criticism is the majority of the story is really two people sitting at a table talking.
Yeah.
Um, but it's not a bad thing either because I did like the fact that it sort of set up these political machinations, and you're sort of learning along with this other character. I don't know what the female character's name is though.
The
Um,
one sitting across from Jacob
Marlo,
Marlowe,
yeah.
he's the engineer.
So she doesn't have a name. They just call her the
No, no,
engineer.
no. What? No. Depends on how far you are with Wildstorm Universe. They have their own sort of Justice League or whatever.
Okay.
Right? She's sees the name of her superhero name is the Engineer.
Okay. All right.
So, but you don't have to know that. So if you start from issue one, you don't have to know anything, right? Uh, if you don't, if you already have a Wildstorm background, it helps. But this is a reimagining of the universe.
Right.
So some things have changed. But if you start with issue one, you don't have to know. You just know she basically can turn into a silver metal being, sort of Iron Man ish. She has a whole bunch of technology, most of her creation, or mostly got from someone else, that enables her with nanites to sort of turn into metal. She can upgrade herself. She can upgrade her, augment her, whatever abilities using that technology that she has created. And that's why one of the people is after her because some of it she stole.
Okay. All right.
But again, all this is explained in issue one. There's not as much exposition in every book, but I only had one issue to give you that would say, is he interested in this? Let me give him as much as I can in one book. The first book might not have drawn you in enough. I thought this one, because you already have a background,
Right.
might do it.
Yeah, and I liked it. Okay, I didn't realize that she was like Iron Man, and the more
Yes.
modern incarnations where the nanites sort of can like grow and
Yeah, the science fiction in this world makes better sense in Wildstorm. It kind of always has.
yeah,
It's not as fantastical. Even the Batman-ish guy is using technology in order to become able to fight the way he does.
right.
So it's much more science-based. But I say if this is something that might interest you, Warren Ellis, man, go in on book one and just read. I think you'll have a good romp with that. I'm gonna start the on issue 13. Also, there's a spinoff, that black guy in the beginning that does that great murdering.
Yes.
Uh, uh, he has his own spinoff.
Okay.
And what may or may not be interesting to you is in that spinoff book, which does take place into this universe, he's going after people whose name you know. The first person he's going after is Oliver Queen.
Okay.
But Oliver Queen in that universe is not Green Arrow, but he Green Arrow-ish, but also evil. So he's actually going after Justice Leaguers who are not for justice, and with the Wildstorm spin on them.
Right.
So later on, he goes after Barry Allen, which is using some weird sci-fi, but it's also messing with his mind, but also giving him speed. And he goes after. So that whole series is them going after Justice League members. So
Interesting.
for me, I like that because I wanted to see a different spin on those characters with the same name and the same look.
Is that also being written by Warren Ellis, or it's a different guy or a
It's a
different
different
person?
guy.
Yeah.
It's a different guy, but it is in this universe.
Okay. All right.
And for those that are listening, if you do have DC Universe, whatever streaming service, this series is on that streaming service.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit older, 2017, I think, right? So it's a couple
Yeah,
years old now.
yeah. So that there's a whole bunch of books now. So you got at least 24 books that
Right.
you could read if you're feeling this.
I thought that was kind of interesting too, because it does show that on the cover.
Hmm.
It's like clearly denoted. We're on issue 6 of 24. This is a
Yep.
24 issue arc.
Hmm.
Like you will get a full story in those 24 issues, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think it's good reading. And this is another thing where you could go to Barnes and Nobles or whatever, and you could probably find this graphic novel and
Collected,
just
yeah,
sit
at least in
get you a latte, sit and read, and
yeah,
really have a good day of it. And then, that's one thing I like about sort of reading it like this in the morning or going to see a movie in the morning. It sort of just really sets my day off well.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's all the issues and comics that we have to talk about today. Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to talk
No,
about?
no, just keep reading. There's more out there. Keep reading and everything. And thank you for bringing something that was not Marvel or DC to the table.
Yeah.
Because I can't emphasize enough. There's great stuff out there. Not that Marvel and DC is not great, but there's great stuff out there that's also not Marvel and DC. So it's interesting that I brought a Marvel and you didn't.
Right. Well, you bought Marvel and DC.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking to the guy that runs the shop down the street from my house, and I was telling him about because he did order the Catalyst books, so he's got those coming in. What is it? I can't. 7 days, is that
Yeah, I think it is 7 days.
that's the one book that we read on the show.
But again, all those other characters have their own series that are at least 2 years old of stuff to read. So if
Right.
there's any one character you like, you could just go into that.
Yeah. So he's getting the Catalyst Prime books. He is getting Collapser, which I thought was
Okay.
interesting. So
Yeah,
Collapser
yeah.
just came out with a new issue this last week. Yeah, my pull for this week, even though I brought in the older EC comics, like the new
Hmm.
stuff that I bought was pretty hefty. Like I was like, I can't buy comics like this every week. Like this was,
I thought you were a baller, man. I didn't think you would stop.
yeah, no, there was a lot of new stuff that came out that was really good. Especially that's not mainstream, but I still gotta buy the mainstream stuff, dude. I still gotta buy the Marvel books that you know, especially X Men. I'm following those. I'm All right. Spoiler alert! Since this is the end of the episode, have you been reading the Donna X books?
I have, but I haven't. I'm not caught up. If it came out this week, I haven't read any
All
of
right. Did you read issue 1 of X Force?
it. I kind of feel like I did. Let me. I may not have though. Now that you bring it up, let's see. Uh,
If you've read, um, I guess issue 2 of most of the Dawn of X books, they allude to what happened in X Force.
no. Oh yeah. Let me see. No, I haven't read it yet. So don't tell me yet.
All right, okay, so no spoilers then.
Yeah.
Anyway, what happens in X Force 1 affects
Oh
the.
yeah, I have read it. I'm sorry.
All right.
Yes, I have read it. So you can talk about
All right, okay. Spoiler alert back on.
it.
Xavier gets shot in the head, and
Yes.
then they have to figure out how to bring him back because he was the mode of transportation for reviving mutants.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck? Because X Force. All right, so I basically told myself, I said, like, I'm gonna buy issue 1 of every single one of the new Dawn of X books, right?
Okay. Good on you.
Just to check it out, just to have the
Hmm.
first issue in every series. And then I'm going to decide which one is, or which few are going to be like the throwaway books that I don't have to follow. But then I got to issue 2 on all of these, and I'm like, son of a bitch, they're talking about what happened in X Force 1 in all of these books.
Yeah.
So Hickman is both a genius and an asshole, and he's selling X books.
Yes, he's doing what he's hired to do. You
Yeah,
can't hate him for that. He, you
yeah,
can't.
I do because I want to get like all of my X Men story in like 1 or 2 titles. I don't want to have to buy 6 titles.
Or if you here's the thing, if you have to have him now, you have no choice.
Right.
Just wait for the graphic novels.
Yeah, they are talking about a collected edition and
They have to do one. There's no way they don't.
yeah, March
Because
or something.
House of X, Powers of X, that's a coffee table book like I don't know what. Come on,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
One, right? So they have to do it. In fact, I was looking on Goodreads and they have it seem to have it as a collection.
yeah.
So
It's coming out for sure.
yeah. So I already added as if I already read it because I did actually already read it,
Right.
and I added it. I added it to the books I've read this year because you're running behind on Goodreads, man. You
I
gotta stay in the
will.
game.
I'll do the comics if they've got the collected trades. I'll start adding all that shit.
Even the ones that we did, what last week.
Yeah,
If you read them, put it on the list.
yeah,
Get you. But yeah, so my thought is Xavier planned for this. This is too big. If you just read through House of X and Powers of X, there's a plan for everything, dude. Right? There's no way he didn't plan for this. You know
Well,
what's probably going to happen is they're going to go through all this to try to find a way to save him or whatever. And then he's going to come out of the shadows and say, "Good job, my X-Men. You did just what I knew you would do." But he already handled it.
okay, all
That's
right.
what I think happens, right? He's thinking automatically he's by his mind guy. He's already cloned a body somewhere.
Right.
right? It makes sense that he would clone a body and keep it in suspended animation that he can hop to. It's
Okay.
not like this isn't even the body he has now is not the one he was born with, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's no problem with him going to another body.
Well, I guess maybe they never touch on it. Isn't he in a wheelchair in some of the panels in House of X and Powers of X, and then he's walking in other panels?
I don't think he's in a wheelchair, unless we're talking about old stuff. Like maybe they're talking about before, like they're doing flashbacks, and
Maybe.
so in the flashbacks he may be.
I'll have to go back to House of X and Powers of
But
X
then once he
because,
figured out how to clone every mutant, evil or good, that ever died,
yeah,
right? Everybody you ever wish was still alive is back.
yeah,
Pyro is back. Toad, everybody who ever, he doesn't care. And I got to give credit for that, right?
right.
All mutants get to live. I'm like, well, damn. Kind of wish I was a mutant. That's a good family to be a part of. They won't let me die,
Yeah.
right? So I figure he already got a new body. So how did he come back? So something's already there,
Yeah.
right? Because if he was in a wheelchair then, and he's not in a wheelchair now, and here's another thing about him being in a wheelchair. They've got Shi'ar technology and all this outer space technology, and they can't make him walk again.
Well, yeah, I guess that's sort of one of the funny aspects of when Claremont was writing it, because he was the one that introduced like the romance between Xavier and Lalandra and all that.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not a fan of the art on this X Force book,
no,
but
it does
the
have.
fact that they killed Xavier is compelling.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like I said, I thought that was going to be like one of the throwaway books. Like, okay, I've got issue one. I don't have to follow the rest of the series. But clearly they're doing stuff in that book that's affecting all the other ones. I'm like, God damn it.
Look, man, they're giving you the X-Men universe you've always wanted, right? They rebooted it in a way that was exciting for you,
Yeah.
and they give you all the books you can afford to buy and then some. This is exactly what you wish for,
Yeah.
right? You wanted X-Men to be great again,
Yeah.
and X-Men is great again, and no Avengers to be seen in any of the books, right? That's when X-Men was great, is when there were no Avengers around, right? So, and somehow whatever they're doing is irrelevant to what's happening in the Avengers books. They're not even talking about it.
Yeah.
That's how it's always been, and apparently that's how it should be. I don't know why they just don't get their own universe. With all the powers that they have, why don't they just get their own universe? Why
I,
just have an island?
I mean, well, it's kind of what's happening now, right?
Yeah, I just just get your own. I'm sure there's some mutant born that can go to different universes. Use them. Everybody move over to a new universe. There you go. Krakoa swims over. You know what I mean? And we're all there.
Out of the
So
616.
yes, to the 61X.
All right. And on that note, Russ, it's been great this week.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you guys next week.
And we're out.